Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cultureshock podcast, where you talk about moments in pop culture that shaped and shocked culture forever. Today, we're going to be talking about something a bit different from what I would normally talk about. This isn't going to be an exact moment, this is going to be more of a movement in pop culture. Today, we're going to be talking about 2010's internet emo. I guess you could call it that weird space between 2011 to 2019 where everyone just wanted to be emo, I guess. So let's kick it back to where it first started. So emo's been a thing for a very long time, and I don't think a lot of people know this. It's been around since the mid 80s. It was around with that post-punk revival of like people wanting to be less hardcore and people wanting to be more self-expressive. But the modern day take, and especially this take in the 2010s, didn't really start until after 9/11. I didn't think I'd be talking about 9/11 in a podcast anytime soon, but I guess here we are. So after this happiness trail of Y2K and coming into the new millennium fell down after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the culture around America kind of shifted into two big scopes. This super patriotic scope, where everyone was becoming super American, super hardy ha vibes. And then this other scope where people were starting to speak out about what was going on inside themselves. Think about the 60s hippie movement, but with sadness and eyeliner. So that first wave of emo was the traditional one of what people think. Thinking of My Chemical Romance, thinking of behind the scenes band documentary, the Warped Tour, Paramore, stuff like that. And that's what a lot of people tend to think of when they think of this idea of emo. So as the mid 2000s started to wind down and we were getting into the late 2000s and early 2010s, this idea of being emo started to kind of wind down. People wanted to be happy again, wanted to get up, start partying again, starting to leave their woes behind. Especially after the 2008 economic crash, there's a trend in culture after something bad happens economically. Young people want to rebel against that and go out and party. It happened in the 80s, it happened in the early 2000s, and now that we're starting to get economic worries again, it's happening again. So around 2008, when the big economic crash happened, people wanted to leave this idea of being emo behind. They wanted to go out, bump parties, bump clubs, do everything like that. So this idea of being publicly emo in person kind of fell down until the rise of these two apps called Tumblr and YouTube. So what is internet emo? Internet emo was this idea of putting everything that was more in person, with the first wave of emo getting super big in the mid 2000s, and just blowing it out of proportion on the internet. And this was a weird time where the internet was starting to become more restricted, but people still did not know how to really use it. So people were posting everything. And with emo people, it comes this line of people oversharing about negative mental health, self-harm, eating disorders. All of these really destructive behaviors became the norm to talk about, especially on these two apps, Tumblr and YouTube. So taking all these really negative things and then making an internet group about it was something that really culture shocked the world. It got to the point where this was becoming the new norm for people who wanted to be on the internet. And it was pretty easy to spot these people in real life too. They always were wearing Dan and Phil merch, who were these two main speakers for this mid-2000s internet culture. They really were the phenomenon. They had a Tumblr account. They shopped at Hot Topic. They listened to My Chemical Romance. They loved Death of a Bachelor by Panic at the Disco. So even though it was started on the internet, it was becoming a real-life thing again, too. It really reached its height around 2015 to 2018. I remember, this is one of the movements I'm going to talk about that I personally remember and was kind of involved in. I could remember going into middle school and into early high school and seeing people decked out, all from head to toe in black, wearing Converse, would do that really thick eyeliner again. Things were coming back around for this emo movement. And I remember I wanted to be one of these people so badly. Like, I could think back to being 12 and 13, and I can think of a bunch of kids back in 12 and 13 trying to perfect this in real life. but it wasn't really a thing in the South where we live. So I can think of all the people back then posting like on their Tumblr being like the dreams of living in the Midwest and all that different stuff. But eventually, emo did not come around anymore. It all just meticulously vanished. And this was mainly caused by the 2020 pandemic. The pandemic killed a lot of subcultures overall. Like, once people were able to self-discover within their own homes and not having to do it publicly, or looking for that outlet on the internet like we were so desperately looking pre-pandemic, this idea of needing to be different that emo kind of profited on in a way, this idea to push the boundaries of what was acceptable in the social norm, wasn't really a thing anymore if there was no social norm anymore. So as some of these people got older and of course aged out of this emotional emo era of their life, there was not a real subset of people bringing it back underneath. There was no generational shift. At least this is what everyone thought. Until the app TikTok started to rise again and give birth to the new age of emo people. These people brought back emo with a vengeance, with their whole new breed of emo celebrities, such as Youngblood and Tariyami, with a whole new emo fashion, with these big high boots and bringing back the bracelets and creepypasta. A whole new thing that was similar to what was done before, but like with this isolationism of TikTok, was able to blow up. And I'm going to call this third wave emo or second wave internet emo. But these people would be so offended if you called them emo. They would go out and rant to you for 15 minutes if you called them emo. They called emo people posers, but they were just emo people with a different name. But the biggest thing of 2020's emo is you have to have your alt name. This was something that defined the culture. People did not want to be called by their normal name because that was oppressive to their parents. You had to go by a whole new name. A lot of people picked arson. A lot of people picked destruction. And there were some people that picked normal names like Sarah. But a lot of people wanted to just have this whole new identity. Where before emo was about a whole new identity, but it was more about fitting the status quo of what was emo. This takes that idea of a whole new identity and throws it to the wall. It was something that, once again, was kind of magical in a new way. I feel like if I was younger now, I would be part of that. I feel like a lot of people would do that too. And that leads us to now, 2025, where this subculture, I don't know if it's dying or if it's just going through another transitional period. But I personally can't think, and through my research now, if there's any mid-2020s emo culture. I don't know if it's dying or if people just haven't discovered it yet, but I am super interested to see where this leads to. Like, is this always going to be a thing? Or is this just going to be a fad of the early 2010s through the early 2020s of this internet alternative emo culture? And this has been the journey through internet emo culture. Thank you so much for listening, and catch me again next week where we talk about all things that shake the culture on the Cultureshock podcast.